Jaun Andreok, arratsaldeon dizuela guztioi, Gutun Zuria nazioarteko literaturaren jaialdi honek ia eman ditu aurtengoz, eman behar zituen eta eskaini behar zituen guztiak.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last session of this year's Literature Festival Gutun Zuria. We've been listening in these last 6 days of a bunch of very interesting reflections, conversations. I would like to thank and acknowledge the audience for attending and supporting us. Almost every day this room is fully booked and also some people follow us on streaming. Thank you also to the media, they've been covering this festival. And also thank you to all my colleagues here at the Azcuna Centro, because without them this will be, from a literature and literary point of view, impossible. I would like to remind you that we are beginning to prepare the 13th edition of Gutun Zuria. We're about to listen a very interesting conversation in between César Aira and María Luisa Blanco. María Luisa Blanco, she is a journalist. She has a very large experience. She's been directing the Center Reina Sofia. She's been also the manager of Babelia and of the cultural supplement of the newspaper ABC. And César Aira, he's always been under the influence of Borges, and this is the case in his last novel titled Prince. So, like in previous days, we are going to listen to some poems before the conversations. So we just take some words from the author's work, and we'd like to read them before the conversation. Today we have with us somebody that has many awards, among which the film award, the Goya, the Spanish Oscar to filmmakers. So please welcome Eneco Sagardoy.
La lectura, el estudio, la asimilación de saberes, datos, ideas, ese camino de perfección intelectual incesante que uno lleva adelante porque sí, sin un objetivo práctico, se lo está haciendo en beneficio del joven que uno fue, para dotarlo de las virtudes y capacidades que tanto le habrían aprovechado entonces. Y el triunfo sobre el tiempo, porque esos nos llevó 40 años saber o entender, sabiéndolo un chico de 15 años le abriría magníficos horizontes de acción, de realizaciones a su futuro, que es nuestro presente. Así el presente se enriquece, y esto no queda en un mero sueño diurno de lo que podría haber sido. El estudio, el comercio silencioso con los libros, que puede parecer seco y estéril, se llena de vida y de poesía, de la generosa realidad de la vida realmente vivida en la juventud, con la esperanza de la obra por venir. Lo difícil es escribir, no escribir bien. En los talleres literarios se puede aprender a escribir bien, pero no a escribir. Para escribir bien hay recetas, consejos útiles, un aprendizaje. Escribir, en cambio, es una decisión de vida que se realiza con todos los actos de la vida. Los mapas de Borges, que no fueron invento de Borges, pero por algún buen motivo se le atribuyen, pueden entenderse como una información que cubre totalmente hasta el último detalle los hechos informados, hasta identificarse con ellos y ser los hechos. Un relato de ficción, una novela, no es eso. Todo lo que se dice es todo lo que hay, y no hay más, porque suponer que hay algo más que lo que se dice equivaldría a creer que esos hechos narrados sucedieron de verdad en la innumerable realidad y estaríamos violando el pacto de la ficción. ¿Por qué son desdichados los escritores? Para que lo que escriben tenga que ser tan bueno como para que haya valido la pena sacrificar por ello la felicidad. Habrá un modo menos retorcido de decirlo. Habrá un modo menos retorcido de hacer las cosas bien. Una sola vez, la gran Catalina, zarina de Rusia, condescendió a revelarle a un visitante el secreto de su poder. Consistía, le dijo, en el conocimiento de la gente, ni más ni menos. Estudiaba a un individuo, también podía ser un grupo, una corporación, una nación entera, hasta saber qué era lo que quería hacer, y entonces ordenaba hacerlo. Todos la obedecían sin rechistar, no solo sus súbditos, sino también los de otros monarcas, ciudadanos de repúblicas, ricos, pobres, sabios, campesinos, civiles, militares, todo el mundo. Su poder no tenía límites. No puede excluirse la posibilidad de que le estuviera tomando el pelo a su circunstancial interlocutor, pero de todos modos la receta da que pensar. Fragmento de la obra Continuación de ideas diversas del autor César Aira, que recibimos ya en el estrado en conversación con María Luisa.
So we welcome now on the stage César Aira to have a conversation with María Luisa Blanco. Well, thank you for coming, and thank you also for coming in such a large number during all this week. It is you with your presence that really make these conversations meaningful. Thank you also to César Aira. I think this is an excellent closing conversation of this 11th edition. You should all congratulate because he's making a great effort. He doesn't like public events, but now he's learned that he also owes himself somehow to his readers. Thank you, Marisa, he says. I'd like to say something about this writer. We could say that he's the total writer. He combines all genres, he melds them together, he could use poetry, narrative, philosophy. In his books, readers can find really everything. After the text that has been read, we can appreciate that literature is part of his life. Sometimes he is himself the main character in his book.
Y para mucha gente,
to me and to many people, César Aira, he's not the most important Argentinian writer, but he's also one of the most important writers in the world. And I know he hates me saying this, but I've got to say this because this is what I think. If the Swedish Academy ever sorts his issues, I think César should be awarded a Nobel Prize for literature, especially when his work is literature in the essence, in a pure state. I've already said that in Aira's books you can find anything. He's really a very surprising writer. He's very deep, but he's very close at the same time. And he's very colloquial. And one of the things that I really like to underline about his literature is that he puts the reader in a state that is very close to joy, to happiness, because he takes you to that original sort of a field of literature or a state of that literature should promote in a human being, that is really entertainment. Many people say that they laugh with his books because he has a very refined sense of humor, but also he makes you think. His books make you think, and they're deeply related to the essence of human beings. And I always like to remind one of the great literature critics, Comte. He would call César Aira, saying, "Here I have my reading from Volcano." Aira. He used to call him a volcano. Because very fairly he says that he is a writer with a kind of literature that is constantly sort of boiling. I'd like to say also that if we had to sort of classify in a library Aira, I would certainly have him with all the classic writers. And as Baudelaire, he always says, let's always move on towards the new things. He's very modern. So with this conversation, I'd like this writer to grant us some of the keys of his literature. And hopefully we will all enjoy this conversation a lot. So be welcome, César, as I've said already. And I'm going to start with a question that, has a little anecdote in it. There was an exercise in a school, and when they ask students, what are a hake and a sardine? And the young boy said, they're friends. What does this answer mean to you, suggest to you? Well, César says, this reminds me of a surrealistic writer, Benjamin Pérez, a friend of mine, that he wrote a book, this book with the title, Three Cherries and a Sardine. I think the secret of the wonderful things, of surrealistic things, come from that sort of fusion or union of that little red fruit, a cherry, so much related to the love, like in the temps de cerises, the time of cherries, and then something very prosaic, like a sardine. But this is not a naive question, because this really places you in the kingdom of the unexpected. And I think there is where you really feel at ease. Yes, the unexpected. Yeah, the unexpected is related to the new things, and that's always what I was always after. I didn't want to look for the good things or to follow rules to do something good. If I had to give a piece of advice to young writers, which I never do, I would always tell them, don't try to make good books. There are already enough good books. You don't have a life long enough to read them all.
Eso que ha sido mi lema, ese verso de...
What we really are after is to try to find the new things, to really go to the end of the unknown to find the new things. It's not easy because for something to be really new, you don't have to sort of look for a new subject. I think it is about choosing new structures, new paradigms within literature. And I think the kind of things that I do, well, they're not really novels, what I do. It is rather in the narrative genre. I don't know, you can call it a tale, a novel. It doesn't matter. So I think what I do, if you compare it to plastic arts, they're very evolved and are really looking for the new things, for the avant-garde. But also if we compare these with poetry is very different. In the last 100 years, poetry has changed a lot. The Polish writer that I read recently, somebody would write a poem as Rubén Darío wrote 100 years ago that would look very much like a parody, very ridiculous. Instead, the novels we write nowadays are almost exactly the same, apart from subject matters. You can talk about atomic bombs or cars or planes, but the structure, the style is like a novel that was written 100 years ago, or even 200 years ago, 300 years ago. Jane Austen's novel could be a novel by Elena Ferrante. So doing something new in narrative, it's not quite easy. Well, this is why she says you are so peculiar, because you don't follow any rule. And there is where we see the seed for something new, because sometimes I wonder myself, what is an avant-garde? What is new? Well, he says, I think in literature, every avant-garde attempt to do something radically new end up in no way out the street in a cul-de-sac, because language is still the tool and that has no change. You can play with words as Joyce did in Finnegan's Way, but I mean, it is a dead end. Also, like poets that would sort of have words like a constellation in a page. That's okay, but apart from that, what else can you do? That's it. I think when you are searching for something new, for something different, I think, well, at least the strategy that I follow is by doing it from the point of view of sabotage, to make something that looks like an ordinary novel, but inside it is sort of full of holes. Well, you've written many books, also many short books, that's also true. But the book, once it is finished, you're not very moved by it. You are more into the creative process itself. Why is it so? Well, simply, he says, this is related to the amount of books I've written. I mean, the amount of pages are not many. I think in 1-2 books by Joyce, Carol Oates, or Stephen King, I could, all my pages could be just 2 of their books. And the secret behind this is the pleasure I have for writing. To me, it's a pleasure to write, and it's the biggest pleasure ever. I love a line from Stendhal when he say, the tense and profound pleasure of writing. And this you can compare to the pleasure of reading. All writers, we are also readers. But the pleasure of reading also you can find some sometimes relief in it and keeps us alive. And it is also very porous. Because sometimes you sort of run over words and you might even skip some. But writing is a very dense, a very deep effort or exercise, because you have to sort of give a shape to every word, to every line. So reading is a pleasure, but it's something that sort of slides over the surface. When you're reading, you're sort of sliding over the surface of the page. I mean, the eye slides over the page, while writing, the eye sort of dives into the page. Well, the effort is very different, she says, when you're reading or writing. Well, I write very slowly, and I think very well of every line, of every sentence, and I hope that in every line something happens, that there is there an idea, or a game with ideas, or a metaphor, an image. So this is why, you know, my texts are quite always dense, solid, thick, but then they read it very quickly, so then I wonder, why did I make such an effort? So, I don't know, I don't expect any reader to spend like 4 months to read my 80 pages, maybe in an hour and a half they're done. Well, she says, when somebody faces your books, well, don't get frustrated, because this is something that we appreciate. I mean, that we have the impression that you are playing, and that is one of the appeals of your literature. It looks like a game, and you get into the game, and this is why you are in that state of joy, of happiness. This reminds me of when I was reading William Brown, or those teenagers' books, when they made you be sort of the character, the leading character in those books, or to feel like that. But I think that apparent game that you have is because you're very committed to literature. And I'd like to get closer to that game of yours and to your commitment with literature. Well, he says, that makes me think that I'm not really a real man of avant-garde, because somebody that is really doing an avant-garde tries to sort of make a rupture, to break the old schemes. So I think I do something in between. I use like an old shell, and inside that shell there is a new seed eventually. I don't know, maybe. But readers are always there. Sometimes I am asked if I think of readers while writing. Yes, I do. But I think of the reader that I am myself. The reader is my quality control of what I am writing. What a mess. Sometimes talking about these things, an hour after the event is finished, I realized that I said just the opposite of what I really think. But you know, our work, writing, creating, is very intuitive. You do it because it flows out of you. And trying to be like the explainer, yeah, it is difficult, but it helps readers. Sometimes when I am interviewing people, I say, well, I am pressing this writer to unveil a mystery, you know, and sometimes you don't even know about it. Well, he says, yeah, no, sometimes there is no mystery to unveil. Well, there are some influences in your work that you acknowledge, but I am surprised by the devotion you have by Roberto Al and Borges, and I think they are not similar at all to each other. Well, Roberto Al, no, I'm not so much into him, but I think Borges to me is still somebody I deeply admire. I never felt that sort of anguish related to influences. It is because I accepted them all. I think you feel a stress when you feel you are possessed by other writer and you cannot really get out of there. It's like the Kafkians, they say like they are into Kafka and they cannot like get out of that style, that way of doing. In my particular case, I change my inspiration or influences once a week, depending on what I am reading. And sometimes I even almost copy them. But to me, Borges is very present, even 20 years after his death. I think every day with my friends we quote or we mentioned Borges for one reason or another, because of his jokes, because of his witty lines. You didn't get to know him, did you? She asks. Do you remember any anecdote? No, he says. I saw him often at Florida Street near from his home, and near his home, and also at the university. I attended some of his conferences. And I've already said this, but I never talked to him, ever, which was very bad to me. Many of my colleagues, they've made a whole career after talking to Borges for 5 minutes. So it's very cost effective. You know, they say, Borges used to tell me. Also, often I am asked if it is not overwhelming, the presence of Borges in Argentine literature, because Argentine literature is quite small. And I think it's the opposite. I think it is stimulating, and also all the speakers of this language, we are all proud of him. And I think he made the standard be very, very high. And for Argentinians, we are very Argentinians, unfortunately, all Argentinians. It is true. Borges, has many different ways to express, and all of them are good. And also Olga Orozco, Alberto Lirri. Well, I cannot remember all the poets that you like, but in between the Borges poet, the poet or the narrator, would you make a difference? Well, I think poetry to him was like his way to sort of enjoy himself. He's got some poems which are good. But to him, I think it was like a pastime, like a hobby, poetry. In my early years in Buenos Aires, when I was 19, 20, I was surrounded by big poets. and they belong to a class that is gone missing. You know, those poets that burn in their own flames. They used to be suicidal, alcoholics, you know, but surrounded by this sort of, halo of romanticism. Sometimes I wonder, sometimes now writers, they talk about politics, about very down-to-earth things, about silly things. I don't know how they can get new followers. Well, I don't know, she says. Well, you know, when I got to Buenos Aires, the first poet woman that I met was Alessandra Belhamid. She was a legend when she was alive. And being close to her was a privilege to me. And also Waldo Lamborghini. He got to be my very closest friend. And I don't know, many others like Tec de Molina, all these realistic writers in Argentina, like Olga Orozco. I don't know, many others. Sometimes I wonder if I am not falling into, you know, what the old people say, like they all say, well, the good old times, you know. There is a line in the lyrics of Maria Elena Walsh: for those that were not a woman or a worker, the old times were good times. When you talk about Pizarrí, you wrote an essay about her, and to me, it really moved me. It really moved me, that essay of yours. And you really put her in the surrealistic tradition. Do you think the discourse, the literature, the poetry, and the poetic and the literary discourse of these can coincide with the plastic arts discourse? Well, I don't know, maybe. My inspiration, my stimuli, I wonder if they do not come more from music, from films, rather than from literature itself. I don't know, really. Nowadays, I think I'm moving away, not from plastic arts, in the sense of what I study, my readings, visiting exhibitions, but I no longer have the intention to write catalogs for my friends that are painters, because many writers are doing so because of money reasons, basically, because there is where they make big money. So this is not due to an ethic issue, but this is due to an issue of elegance. I don't like doing it. And when we talk about taste, I think literature looks into arts somehow, don't you think? Well, who knows, he says. Somehow, the French say bête comme un peintre, that is, you're silly as a painter. Well, I didn't want you to say that. I didn't want you to go that far and now talk against painters. Just, I wanted to say that maybe literature has also a place like in Beaux-Arts, like the arts themselves, plastic arts. I've not finished your book. I only bought it yesterday, but I'm eager to read it. I'm almost finished it. And I really like it. I'm really enjoying it. Somehow, there is something different in this book. In relation to literature, I am just to read from you, just to read it from you. I'm sorry I didn't finish it, but I think we could comment some things. Something that is in the front of the book, there is a mystery. Could you unveil that mystery? That will be nice. Yeah, the title is Prince. I think this is a Catalan family name, if I am not wrong. I thought about writing the story of Prince, but in the last minute I say no, and this happens to me often. I think I'm going to develop this in such a way, and then suddenly, because I've thought of it, sometimes you're no longer into it. So I just left it there as a mystery, as a little mystery, that I don't think will be so difficult to sort of unveil by using things like Google or the Wikipedia. I think the younger Prince was an architect that in the years 10 and 20, he won a contract to build the Faculty of Law in Buenos Aires. And this to his disgrace, I've got to say, because the authorities, they wanted a Gothic building. And he didn't know anything about Gothic style, so he came to Europe to study medieval cathedrals. Then he presented his new project, because the first one with when he won the competition was a French-style building. And so this kind of Gothic cathedral began to be built in the downtown Buenos Aires in 1920, more or less, in the 20s. And there came trouble. And many mysteries sort of developed around this sort of mysterious building. Apparently, he committed, Mr. Prince, suicide, because halfway through the building he realized that there was an error, a mistake in his estimates, in his calculations, and everything was going to fall apart, which didn't happen. But somehow this building was not finished, and it was as if there was some kind of curse on this building, and the architects that were hired, they didn't want to finish. So there it is, standing in the most elegant neighborhood in Buenos Aires. And it is a weird monster, unfinished, without envelope, and it is kind of a Gothic cathedral where many things are missing. And since the novel is about a writer of Gothic novels, where at the end there is a scene where this Gothic issue with dead bodies hanging from the walls do happen there, in this university. Nowadays it is the second building of the University of Engineering. And to know, here we have sort of the feeling that well, this writer in your book, he says he's really fed up with writing, no? This sense of weariness with writing. Yes, I guess somebody that's been writing for his whole life, you know, it comes a time when he no longer, so she no longer wants to write. I can imagine this, but it would not happen to me, César says. Well, often you are the characters, the main character in your novel, so maybe this is a scoop? No, he says. Recently, in a public interview like this one in New York, without lying, I said there that with age, I am about to become 70. Everything goes down, declines. Your energy, also your will, your urge to do something, the desire to be recognize or knowledge, also the desire to make money. I've lost all that. But it is by some kind of a miracle that I have not lost my desire to write. And even though my faculties, my skills are on decay, are declining, what I said in New York is I am willing, in English it is better, I am willing to enjoy my decadence. Disfrutar mi decadencia, to enjoy my decadence. Yeah, decadence. I think we have to start enjoying it. Yes, she says, birthday, cumpleaños, is one of my favorite books of yours. You wrote it when you became 50. And this is a very melancholic book where you complain about lack of energy. Already then, I was feeling that. He laughs and he says, like, for 20 years, I've been feeling the same. Well, so she says that in this book, you pay tribute clearly to Borges. I mean, you're closer and closer to Borges, no? As you said. Tell us about that. Well, because this writer of Gothic novels, he writes the classics of the Gothics, like Horace Walpole, the Monk, the Louise, Melmoth of Maturini, the Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, the Mysteries of Ardolfo. Exactly as Pierre Menard wrote the Quixote. So I know sometimes say that all my work is like a footnote to the work of Borges. Are you satisfied when you finish a book? She asks. No, he says. So how do you write the end? Well, somehow I finish them. Not very well, usually. And I am always unsatisfied. I always think I should have made another effort, an additional effort. But that's okay, because then I feel the urge to continue. I cannot really imagine what it would be like to feel satisfied and to say, wow, this is a very good book. No, I always feel, so maybe you get that satisfaction when you start writing. Yes, I somehow feel very euphoric when I start. And I need that tiny, weird idea to start. It should be like a game, like a paradox. I could give you an example because it happened to me yesterday only. Yesterday, I went here in Bilbao to that huge metallic thingy that you have, that museum. I walked around. You mean the Guggenheim Museum? She says. Yes, that one. Yeah, I walked around and I was mesmerized because since I was very young, I always loved huge buildings. I don't know what they mean to me. They look like exuberant. It's like you feel you're a king when you look at them from the outside. But then I paid the ticket and I got in, and then I didn't like it at all. Because there is a waste of space everywhere. I mean, 30 meters height for the roof. Wow, it was a waste. So when I came out, just an idea dawned on me. Maybe a house huge outside and tiny inside. That is the type of ideas that I'm very much into. But I wrote it down in my notebook. Are you already writing something on that? She asks. Maybe you're going to locate the next novel in Bilbao. No, this is like, you just jump directly into this idea. Like saying, I used to live in a house that was huge inside and tiny outside, and then to go on from there. So then I sort of embark with the reader in that ambiguity, in that feeling of perplexity. So what can I do? How to handle that? How could it be that a house is huge outside and tiny inside? I don't know, I'll find my way out. Sometimes I find my way out, not always. I didn't want to finish this conversation without talking about what we're all talking about this week. It is return to nature. Return to nature as an eventual way to look for happiness. And these days we've been talking about the weird things that this very highly technical or technified society we live in, what this society is doing and discussing the decay of the environment and damage to the environment. And maybe you will go say something that will be the contrary to everything we've been thinking or saying here, but what do you think? Do you agree somehow with Thoreau's ideas, with the naturalist, conservationist theories in general that do not only mention nature? They were also an attempt, like in the Walden, the hippies novel, you know, to live in the wild, in the wilderness, or also civil disobedience, he says. Well, you've got to be careful with Thoreau, because from his cabin he would take all his laundry to his mom's. It is true. So you've got to be careful with him. Well, it doesn't really have to do with this, but I love those Chinese painters. They will go away from the cart and they will go far away to a remote hill and meditate. This is kind of something utopic. This is about daydreaming, because we're not really going to do it. I think we've been breathing too much toxic gas to now go and breathe pure air in the nature, in the wilderness. Well, yes, taking care of nature, yes. But you don't have to take so much care of it. I think nature takes good care of itself. And sometimes every ism, conservationism, or, you know, when you overdo it, it's like panda bears. They are dying to disappear, and we don't let them disappear. You know, we're doing these assisted reproduction systems to these poor female pandas. And, you know, disappearance is something that is natural. So, I don't know, you know, doing these things, I quite disagree. But this theory that we live in the era of those that, you know, of these people that are very intrusive, like these American ladies that would go to a remote village in Africa to teach them how to use Tupperware. Well, the main character in Prince, even though I've not finished the book, as I said, is in the search for happiness. Yes, of course, he starts consuming opium like crazy. Why? Yes, why is he smoking that much opium? Does he need it to create, or no? Because he gave up writing. It's just like to fulfill his time. I don't know. I think I chose it because it was really ridiculous, you know, when you want to fill the hours of your day and you start thinking, what shall I do? Collect stamps or play chess? Well, no, I'm going to smoke opium. Is it maybe because you've tasted it yourself, you try it yourself? And he says, like, no, not at all. I don't even know what it is like. But I know opium is like a double weight track. there is imagination, all these like oriental dreams, pagods and whatsoever, whatnot. And then opium is also a drug, a medicine. And then it helps you fight depression. It's the perfect it's a perfect drug to fight depression. So it is to let your imagination fly, but it's also, you know, to give you joy and to get you out of depression. So I think with happiness and opium, we can call this a conversation and start a Q&A session with the audience. Should you have any questions, please fire out.
No veo nada, ¿eh? Las del micrófono que pasen.
Hola, buenas tardes. Muchas
Good evening. Thank you very much, María Luisa and César. Simple question. César, I'd like to know which is the book, which of your books do you like better? Which is your favorite book? Well, I don't like to be asked this question because I don't know. The one is something that is like a fairy tale. It's the one that I quite not dislike. The one that sort of, you know, helps or prevents literature critique from, you know, talking about the society of policy. Because it's like a fairy tale, you know, there's nothing they can say about it. So then I win. There's one I really like, and it is called La Princesa Primavera, so Spring Princess. This is a princess that lives in an island, and she's spring, and then the bad uncle, her bad uncle is winter, and well, maybe there is a message in it. No, you will never find like a serious message behind it. And then also I was a modern girl. Yo era una chica moderna. I was a 7 years old girl, and another one I was a married woman. This is like a trilogy and of novels where I myself try to be a young girl, a modern girl, and a woman that suffers with a husband that is a monster, like most of the husbands of these women that suffer, not the husbands of every other happy woman, of course. Well, continuation of diverse ideas. I think it is also a book that I wanted to talk about, but we ran out of time. Yes, because in my novels I always open like parentheses, open brackets to start showing my own philosophies, but I've been told off because they say that this sort of cuts the thread of the tale. And she says, I like it. Well, you know, the thing is, I began writing my ideas in an electronic file, and in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, I had like 1,000 of them. And then this publishing house said, like, please write an essay. And then I chose, I don't know, 100 and something ideas. And I wrote this little book. Curiously enough, some readers, they told me, no, it doesn't work, your ideas work better within a novel when you open this sort of bracket. Not when you sort of show them directly as ideas, you know. I like it, she says. And it is organized in alphabetical order. Why? Well, because, you know, They are so diverse. There are short tales. I thought it was a game you were suggesting to us. No, no, no. It's because I have, yes, like memories from my childhood, some notes after some readings I've been doing. There was no way to put it together in order. So I tried to be very neutral. So I said, like, okay, let's display these in alphabetical order. Any further question? Have you read Bolaño? It's not clear to me. No, he says. No, I think that time is gone for me. Well, you know, there are so many writers I've not read, really, even though I've spent most of my life reading, that many people have not read, really. Still, I don't know why should I have read him, though. Congratulations, Marisa, for organizing this Gutuntheria. It's been really brilliant. And she says, well, there is a team behind me. Well, yes, congratulations to you and to the whole team. And this conversation, I really, really enjoy it. I really enjoyed listening to Mr. Aira. Given your age, you are like in your 70s almost. So in the 70s in Argentina were critical years. So I'd like to know, with your way of thinking and writing and seeing reality, I'd like to see how you saw that reality in the 70s in Argentina. Well, he says, I started the 70s in jail, and it was a very good vaccine. After that, I just sort of locked myself in my tower of ivory with my books and didn't want to know anything else or had to do anything else with reality because I realized that it was useless. Well, skepticism. Since then, you know, I live in this sort of with this feeling of being very skeptical, and now I see reality from the outside, from the other side of a glass. And it's okay. Because this makes part of the freedom of a human being. You've got to accept yourself as you are. I made many mistakes in my youth, and I pay a high price for them, and that was it. That was the end of my relation with reality. Good afternoon, or good evening. Have you ever thought of readers that might read your tales, your stories, in a reverse way? I think many readers now, we start by the end, so we know the end, the ending. And then, of course, you have to find out how things got to that situation, how characters are in the situations there are, where everything comes from. Have you ever thought of that, of readers that sort of read books starting with the end? Well, I read many thrillers, many pollards. I could not do that, because if you do that, then you know who killed, who is the killer. So the whole thing will be wasted. My mom, she would rather read, first of all, the last page of a book. And I would tell her, maybe, you know, you are spoiling. As we say now, we use spoilers for everything. Maybe you are spoiling. As now in Spanish they say, you are spoileando. You're spoiling the book. But I think both readers and writers we are free. We follow our free will. We are not really forced to read, to write. We do it when we want, as we want. So please feel free. Let's read the other way around if that is that makes you feel good. Go ahead. Any further questions? Okay, we call this a Q&A then. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
Bueno, por aquí yo no veo nada.